Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. We're going to be talking about health today and approaching something that many of us usually try to consider and keep in check as we approach midlife, and that is high blood pressure. After all, who wants to lead to things like hypertension and heart disease, and potentially the ideal that we might have an onset of Alzheimer's disease due to a lack of flow of blood, or too much perhaps to our brain? On our program today, our guest has served more than 35 years serving people from around the world. She's also lectured pretty extensively as well. She's joining us here on the program today to talk with us about her book, The High Blood Pressure Hoax. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Dr. Sherry Rogers. Dr. Rogers, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm always happy to help people empower themselves and learn how to cure. Because actually I've been a medical doctor for 43 years.
43 years,
yes.
Okay.
And still to this day, and I've taught hundreds of physician courses in 6 countries, and still to this day in our medical schools, the focus is not cure. In fact, how many times do you go to the doctor and have him say, I'm going to cure you, or let's find out how to cure, for example, today, your high blood pressure? They don't. It's how are we going to medicate it? What drugs are we going to use? And that leads you down the rocky path to developing other problems, many other. Once you start on one drug, even if it sounds like it's a good thing for high blood pressure, then you are automatically propelled into accelerated aging and into other diseases that are seemingly unrelated. Would you like some examples?
Absolutely, please.
Well, first of all, one of the main causes for high blood pressure, or a chief one for many people, are the NSAIDs, the nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, Motrin, Aleve, ibuprofen, all those things for pain and arthritis. And yet we published a medical study years ago and then a book after it called Pain Free in 6 Weeks that shows that 3 out of 4 people with any type of arthritis, if you just put them on a nightshade-free diet, no potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, cayenne, chili, paprika, modified food starch, etc., the directions are all in Pain Free in 6 weeks, they no longer have any arthritis. And it doesn't matter if it was juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which is one of the hardest ones in the whole world to treat. You can cure it. And those references were in our newsletter because everything I say is always referenced. I'm an admitted reference junkie. I have to have the scientific backup for everything I say because I'm a medical doctor. It's just the way my head works. And I'm no smarter than any other doctor. I was just sicker. So it forced me to learn how to cure the body because I, too, was brought up with the notion you just drug everything. So let's go back to high blood pressure as an example. When a person's pressure is up, it's like simple plumbing 101. If you lower the volume of fluid in a system, you lower the pressure. So the first medication that's given is a diuretic. These are the practice guidelines put out by doctors, experts in the field who tell doctors out in practice how to practice, what drugs should be used first. And so when you use a diuretic, sure enough, it lowers the volume of fluid. You start urinating like crazy, and the pressure often goes down. Sometimes that's all the person needs, but only for a while. Because remember I said at the start, as soon as you start one drug, you are screwed. Because now you're on the path to deteriorating even faster. Because what the hydrochlorothiazide, diuretics, and lodipine, etc., do is they lower your magnesium, for one thing. Well, a lot of people, if you fix the magnesium, they no longer have high blood pressure because government studies show the average person only has about a third of what they need. And so when you lower it even further, now you go into higher blood pressure. So they say, oh, you need another medication. Or you can go into arrhythmia, like atrial fibrillation. Then they say you need cardiac ablation. And they still have not cured or even looked at the proper test to assay the magnesium. The serum magnesium, which is sometimes done, and rarely is the RBC magnesium, there's a huge difference. If you do the serum magnesium, it can look so well. It can even look higher than normal when your magnesium is in reality so low you could have a heart attack in the next minute. In fact, a major symptom of low magnesium, when it gets low enough from diuretics and other medications, is sudden cardiac arrest. And as we showed in the high cholesterol hoax, or the cholesterol hoax book, half the people who die of a heart attack, it's their first one. They never had any warnings. They never had high cholesterol. They never had high blood pressure. They didn't have any symptoms, but they had low magnesium. Now, if your pressure continues, which it's bound to because you're on a diuretic that's lowering magnesium, potassium, and other nutrients, now a next medication might be a calcium channel blocker like Norvasc. And as we referenced in the high blood pressure hoax, in medical journal articles, they showed that when you give people those types of medications called calcium channel blockers, that's the whole category, you actually, MRI studies show it shrinks the brain within 5 years, and when you test their intellect, it has rotted. They are dumber. And magnesium actually is one of nature's calcium channel blockers. And in fact, as people will find out, most of the curable things, the things that bring on cure, are nutrients and diet, things that are natural to the body. The body was designed to heal. It's only in medicine that we treat every symptom as a deficiency of the latest drug because that's where the money is. And back where I said the practice guidelines were made by experts in the field, well, the Journal of the American Medical Association a few years ago showed us that over 87% of these experts were on the payroll of the pharmaceutical companies. Mm-hmm. And another study showed that, and this one was, again, right in the Wall Street Journal as well, they showed that if you look at over 2,000 recommendations by cardiologists for not only blood pressure, cholesterol, treatment after a stent, arrhythmias, etc., only less than 11% are based on science. The rest are based on pharmaceutical influence. So we are not treating people with evidence-based, best medical care at this point in time. And it goes on and on. When you add more drugs, you deplete more nutrients, and you have not cured anything. You've only made the blood pressure look better, but you have not cured the problem so that you don't need a medication. For example, many people, the diet is full of trans fatty acids, from processed vegetable oils, the grocery store oils, and if they don't know about how to get those out of the body, it's in the high blood pressure hoax, it's in Detoxify or Die in even more detail, then they will never cure their high blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, and so they need what we call an oil change. They need to get the bad oils out and get the good oils in. For example, the cell membrane, where the instructions for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, cancer, everything come out of it. They're like the computer keyboard of the body. The cell membrane is like a sandwich. It's a double layer of chemicals, and you can think of the bread of the sandwich as cod liver oil, because as we've evidenced in the books and the newsletters, for many people, you just give them the right amount of cod liver oil. They no longer have atrial fibrillation. They cut their death rate after a stent in half, the chance of having restenosis, etc. Anyway, so oil change for the cell membranes sometimes can be as simple as the cod liver oil, that's the bread of the sandwich, phosphatidylcholine powder, and we always put the 800 numbers, the websites, and the best forms that we've found, and I'm not connected with any companies, so I'm not selling anything except knowledge. So phosphatidylcholine is the meat of the sandwich, the innards. And if you don't add that, then it doesn't matter how much oil you give because it doesn't have the innards of the sandwich. And then the salt and pepper of the membrane is vitamin E. But some folks might say, well, gee, I heard on TV that vitamin E didn't help heart, it didn't help cancer, it didn't help this and that. The studies on vitamin E were so ignorant that it defies logic in 2012. I just can't understand it because these were very sophisticated men and women, researchers at very expensive institutions, and yet they only used 1 of 8 parts of God's vitamin E. For example, they used alpha-tocopherol only in the studies, and we've given the evidence in the newsletters and the books of how when you only use alpha-tocopherol, you actually lower other forms of E that have special properties of lowering blood pressure, healing the heart, carrying away the cholesterol from the cell wall, etc. Taking something that just says vitamin E, which is usually just alpha-tocopherol, if it's not spelled out all the 8 forms, is as dumb as going to the car dealer and saying, hey, I can only afford 1 out of every 8 parts of the car, and I expect it to work. It's so utterly ridiculous. It's just so stupid, and yet that's what those studies were based on. It's unfathomable. Now, another thing is that when people are repairing the membranes of the cells, where a lot of this chemistry originates from, many times they can take good cod liver oils, etc., and it's very important to have the highest quality possible because there are a lot of things wrong with certain forms. If they can't get the oils into the cell membrane and into the mitochondria, God's little organelles inside of our cells where energy is created to heal, then it doesn't matter how much you take of the best quality, it's not going to work. And so you need acetyl L-carnitine. And this is destroyed by the plastic packaging that we have, plastic water bottles, styrofoam coffee cups, etc., plastic wrap on our fruits, vegetables, meats, etc. One of the highest pollutants in the human body, and it damages the cardiovascular system big time. In fact, if you're in the hospital recently, then you have IVs that load you up with more plastic and cyclohexanone, known to damage the heart, create higher blood pressure, etc. So these are some of the very fundamental reasons, and I could go on and on, but I'll let you speak.
No, you're saying a lot of fascinating things, and what's amazing for those of you just joining us, we're talking about the book of the High Blood Pressure Hoax. Our guest today, Dr. Sherry Rogers. Now, 2 things that I kind of wanted to address. The one most immediate one is you were talking about plastic bottles. I'm astounded at how many people buy water from the store in plastic bottles, okay? Now, at first, this seems like a good idea going back 15 years ago. It could even be 20 years ago when you started seeing this on the market. And, you're under the impression, I'm getting fresh, clean, filtrated water, okay? And I thought, I guess that's an okay idea because of all of what you believe, you hear about, you read about when it comes to our water being, toxified. And so you go this direction, think you're doing the right thing. It's pretty cheap, $2 or $3. You get a whole case of bottled water. Then you come to hear about how the plastic containers begin to leach into the water, especially if they're out in places like the sun or when heat is added to them. When you think about people who go jogging or walking, these bottles eventually they start warming up, and you think, oh boy, plastic's not.
Well, the warehouses.
There's the other thing I didn't think about. The thing is, I didn't buy into that for too long, and it was so off and on when I would actually buy bottled water that it was almost, a non-event for me. But you see it constantly as though people are believing this is the right direction to go. And I mean, these are people that are out jogging and running around that are, I'm being fit, I'm going to the gym, I've got my bottled water with me. And so now you're talking about, for instance, plastics, and this is what I began to hear just, probably 5 years ago about leaching. So I avoided it. I thought, well, if you want fresh, water or whatever the case is, why not just buy a filter? For instance, in the long term, it's a lot less expensive, I would think. The other thing you talked about, too, earlier in the program is, I heard on television, or, I might have read it somewhere or somebody told me. And usually it comes from an authoritative source. It is a doctor, it's an expert, that we begin to surrender our particular personal knowledge and power over to somebody else for our health. And then we get upset when it doesn't go the right way, and now you've got, lawsuits going on. You begin to think, and I hate to say this to be mean, probably our listening audience, and by no leaps and bounds am I trying to do that. How come we became so stupid?
Well, part of it is the phthalates. Many medications and phthalates actually damage the very chemistry. We measure phthalates in people's bodies, and we also measure their damage. For example, oftentimes when I will consult on readers of the books and the newsletters in a dozen countries, and what happens is they will have whatever complaint, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, they've just had a stent, they've had a heart attack, they've got cancer, they have depression, whatever. We don't care what the name of the disease or the label is. What we care about is what are the causes and what do we have to do to cure it.
Right.
And when you look at the chemistry of a lot of these people, we do a 13-page assay. The information is in the books and the newsletters, and then we analyze it by phone for them. Most of them have starving cell membranes. The membranes of the cell, which are like the computer keyboard of the whole body, are literally starving. And the membranes of the mitochondria. If I were dead in front of you in the next few seconds, I would be the same mass of chemicals that I was when I was alive. The only difference is the electricity would have stopped flowing. And that electricity that defines life is created in the mitochondria, little organelles inside of all of our cells. This is where God's miracle, one of many of his miracles, of changing a molecule of food into a molecule of a thing we call ATP, or energy, occurs. But if you do an electron microscopic examination of the mitochondria and slice them longitudinally, you see they are a mass of membranes. So go back to where we said most people have starving cell membranes. Their mitochondria are severely poisoned, and that's one of the first places that is poisoned by the phthalates. The phthalates actually poison the very chemistry of making energy in the body and repairing the cell membranes. So, and we measure, but the beauty is we have this all available to measure. The problem is 99% of physicians never heard of the test. They don't know how to interpret 13 pages of the molecular biochemistry because it's becoming a new specialty in medicine. Because you think about it, the guy who puts in your stent, I mean, he's available for emergency surgery. He's totally maxed out. He doesn't have time to go home and read about the molecular biochemistry of healing. He's just plunking you on Plavix, Lipitor, a beta blocker, an ACE inhibitor, an aspirin, and out the door you go, and he checks you in a few weeks and see if your heart's okay, and that's it. And that's why they restenose in 6 weeks, and that's why the drug-coated stent, which is supposed to be the latest and greatest, the New England Journal of Medicine showed in 2007, we're talking 5 years ago, that one increases your cardiac death 18 to 30% more than the bare metal stent. As it should, because now not only do you have a hunk of chicken wire that's a clot magnet in there, but you have chemotherapy.
Oh, my goodness.
That's what the drug-coated stent has in it. It's chemotherapy. And so we go on and on. We get more dangerous, but we're great at fixing the immediate thing, but the ongoing, we just expect people to deteriorate as they age. And I'm no smarter than any other doctor, but I was sicker. I had over 24 incurable problems. I'll be 70 next year. I played 2 hours of tennis 6 days a week in the 84-degree sun. I have no medicines, no symptoms. And so it just forced me, because I had so many medical problems, to learn that, oh my gosh, God designed the body to heal. It's only my profession that wants to keep it a secret, because day one from medical school, we were given a black bag, instruments, etc., from a drug company, and then it just continued. You open up the New England Journal of Medicine to find the latest and greatest. You don't even get to the first article until you're a third of the way through the journal, because it's all drug advertisements. That's what fuels medicine. We go to a medical course. What do we learn? We learn how to use drugs. And so that's why I do not need to write books and newsletters. I've had a fascinating, wonderfully successful career in 40 years in medicine. But I can't stand to see people needlessly dying. And I'm surrounded by people with a lot of money and professionals who are in retirement communities. They think there's a prize for whomever gets to heaven first with the most drugs on board. They're utterly clueless. They think that drugs are the answer for everything.
Yeah, but you're seeing so much more and more, which it seems very encouraging to me when it comes to the idea of, going in to get patched up with a drug to cure a symptom, where, for instance, people just like yourself, I mean, there's a lot of people out there, going back to, I guess, you could consider it to be the old way of doing things. Even more encouraging, I mean, you talk about you practicing medicine for more than 40 years, so you've seen quite a bit on the advertising and, I guess, if you will, the medical propaganda horizon, which has really changed the landscape about the way people receive information about the choices they should be making. For instance, you still see the commercials on television about some unknown ailment that you may have, and all of a sudden they have a solution. But then afterwards, there's about 30 types of side effects. Do you really want to go that one direction for that one thing if you're going to have possibly 10, 15, 20, or 30 more things wrong with you? So you see that, and it makes taking this thing seem a lot more dangerous than if you even bother with it in the first place.
Right. As we've shown in the books and the newsletters, we've had a newsletter for nearly 25 years every month, highly referenced. Everything I say, as I say, is referenced to the teeth in one of the books or newsletters because I don't say a thing without having the scientific backup behind it. You're absolutely right, and in fact, now not only are we barraged on TV with the side effects of drugs, which they have to give, and actually the Wall Street Journal showed years ago that they have been dumbed down because, as they said, there are too many side effects for the doctor to learn, so we're only going to present the top ones from now on in the PDR, the Physician's Desk Reference, the book on side effects of drugs. Anyway, but now you're also being barraged with ads from legal teams that say, well, if you took this drug or if you use this medical device and you have X problems, contact us because we are your friendly local attorneys who...
Sure.
And the problem is, in medicine now, we are literally working blindly, and yet we don't have to. We have the tools with which to measure the phthalates, to measure every single vitamin, mineral, fatty acid, amino acid, organic acid. We know how to look with the crystal ball and see how did the person get whatever they have, high blood pressure, cancer, whatever. We don't care what the name is. And now, what do they have to do to turn it around, to cure it, to get rid of it? And so it's the most fascinating time in medicine, but the lag time is horrendous. It won't happen for another, I would say, at least a decade, if not longer, because I go through files things that I was teaching at medical courses 30 years ago, and they're just starting to become known now as the newest, latest, greatest discovery, and it was there all along. There are a lot of signs that people can use to see if their doctor is going to be capable of healing them as well. First, you might just ask, and what are you going to do to cure my blood pressure, doctor? If he looks at you like you're an idiot, you're in the wrong place. He's never going to cure it because he's telling you it has no cure. That's not true. It's absolutely not true. And so you need to find someone who's more interested and who reads, who likes to read and continually learn. I read 3 or 4 hours of molecular biochemistry a day because that's where the healing of the body occurs. Simple signs, for example, if someone says they are doing good nutritional medicine and they tell you to take alpha lipoic acid, wrong. 50% of that cannot be used by the body. It's thrown away. If they're not prescribing R-lipoic, the racemic one, then they don't know that they're giving you something that 50% of it can't even be used, and it's seen as junk by the body. Or if they're told that, for example, every disease is low in detoxification factors, glutathione as one example. The body makes glutathione. And yet you'll hear all the time people say, well, you can't absorb glutathione. Yeah, you can't absorb certain types. That's why we're very particular about the types that we've recommended in the books and the newsletters, because they have the data showing, and then to boot, we actually measure it as well ourselves in these folks. So we know that it's absorbed, and we can see the difference in the lipid peroxides, the HSCRP, the fibrinogen, the 8-OHDG, the gene damage that leads to diseases. We can see the damage and we can see the correction. And yet, you ask any doctor, are you going to check my lipid peroxides? Say, what? Mm-hmm. In fact, I was just with some friends in the emergency room, and I said, oh, could you please check a fibrinogen, HSCRP, and a homocysteine on them? And they said, oh, we don't have those things available in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And this is a big-name hospital. Other things that you must watch out for if you're, for example, starting with high blood pressure, the first thing you want is your intracellular, or RBC, red blood cell, magnesium measured. Because, like I said, that's one of the first causes of high blood pressure, and it's so fixable. It's also one of the first causes of atrial fibrillation and other arrhythmias and PVCs, premature ventricular contractions, where you feel like your heart kind of did a hiccup, it's beating along at ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-boom. Mm-hmm. And so you have to see the blood test yourself, because if the test says, if the doctor says, oh, I checked your magnesium, then you say, may I see it, please? If it just says magnesium, he's clueless. He did the wrong one. That's a serum magnesium. Less than 1% of the magnesium is in the serum in the body. This was out of the Washington Manual a decade and a half ago. This is not new stuff. You have to look inside the cells, because that's more reflective of the magnesium that's inside the heart, the blood vessels that create high blood pressure, and other organs. So it has to say intracellular magnesium, because, as I say at the start of the show, and we've evidenced this in the newsletters, the serum magnesium can be so high that it looks higher than normal, while in the heart it is so low you can have a sudden cardiac arrest in the next 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. In fact, sudden cardiac arrest, one of the major causes is just magnesium deficiency. A lot of these people never had any risk factors. They didn't have high cholesterol, blood pressure, nothing. It was their first heart attack and their last, because they did not make it. 50% do not make it. Because, think about it. You go to the emergency room, and what do first? If you have had a heart attack, they first throw in an IV of amiodarone and lidocaine, and then they cardiovert you with the paddles, the very dramatic paddles that you see on the emergency room shows on TV. But you can electrocute the heart all day long. If it doesn't have enough magnesium, it's not going to reverse that arrhythmia, and the patient will die. In fact, we did a 4-part last year in the newsletter. I would recommend it to everyone, a 4-part article in the Total Wellness monthly newsletters on how to survive the emergency room, because many people use the nutrients that we talked about, and that was how they survive, because they do not use them in the emergency room. I was surprised at first at what got me on that was that first I started consulting on surgeons, engineers, and commercial pilots who were in their 50s. They were very healthy, jogging and biking and so forth. They had different sports, and they ended up in the emergency room with a cardiac arrest. They arrested, no blood pressure, no heartbeat, no respiration, nothing. And so they cardioverted them with electrical paddles, 600 joules, and nothing. They did another, nothing. Another, nothing. Now, when I was an emergency room physician, you don't sit there and electrocute dead people all day. After about 3, you give up. When they got to the 5th one, somebody with a brain, with one person, walked in and said, you've got nothing to lose. Give him some heparin and magnesium. They did. He revived. When we looked at his hospital records and his lab reports after he got out of the hospital, even though that revived him, the magnesium, they never checked it again while he was there.
Wow.
And it was abysmally low, very dangerously low. He was ready for another heart attack. So I thought, well, wait a minute. I'm going back to the American College of Emergency Physicians Practice Guidelines and the American College of Cardiologists and see what their professional experts recommend for the emergency treatment. You know what it is? Emergency treatment for heart attack, drugs. Nothing about magnesium, heparin, etc. And so we have made sure that folks have these things on hand. In fact, we just heard of another fellow who was saved by having these on hand to give to himself before he got to the emergency room. And when you look at his records, they were never checked. This is scary. I mean, it's funny, but it's scary. And so for folks who want to get the 2011 newsletter, Total Wellness newsletter, because they're all archived back, if they want to say they heard it on Daniel Davis's show, we'll give them 15% discount. They just say that they heard it. They can go to Prestige Publishing, PRESTIGE Publishing.com, or 1-800-846-6687 Eastern Standard Business Hours.
Very good. The book is The High Blood Pressure Hoax. Our guest today, Dr. Sherry Rogers. Thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. A lot of information for people to be able to tackle and start learning things for themselves.
You're welcome. Let's empower more people.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, live your day past